All right, guys. So it's a pleasure to be here. I don't often do speaking engagements. It's usually a panel. So this is a new format. But this doesn't work. Yes. No. Step. Choke it. What? Oh, all right. Cool. All right. Guys, I don't do this. But it's a real pleasure to be here. I just want to thank Creative Mornings and Old School Square for having me. It's telling your story is one of the most sacred and honored thing to do for me. I think for all of us, that's my intention going back many years ago via coffee, is creating a space for people to feel known and heard. It doesn't matter your position of power, your wealth, your accolades. Every single one of us, those all fade away. But every single person really needs to be heard and for their story to continue. And so this is cool. But Yulia kind of beat me to it. I want to hear about why you're here. Because I know, again, if you're a small business owner, or it doesn't matter, any job, 8:30 on a Friday for 2 hours is a significant commitment, right? It's got to be worth something. So why are you here? Like 2 or 3? Coffee, simple as that, man. You can just go right down to any of the shops. Yeah.
Because you created something amazing, and I wanted to hear your process and your inspiration.
All right. Connection. Cool. What she said. All right. Last one. Anyone?
Inspiration.
Inspiration. I got that for you. 0. Well, let me pop out my notes here. And I'm not one for lots of slides. It's just not my. Oh, that's Julia's. I'm not one to kind of fill your mind with media and distraction. I think that's one thing that I feel like we're moving further away from. Is we just want to be entertained and we want glitzy things, but we're losing this ability to be present in the moment, and that's what today's about, the intention. But before I get into all that, let me tell you about my story. I grew up in Massachusetts. I came from a family of ministers. So my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father, my uncle, 2 of my cousins are all preachers. And so that was my culture. It was in the country, it was Pentecostal. Yeah. Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, so it's great. I mean, that's all I knew. But when you have a long line of ministers in your family, they're like, you're next. And so as a kid, I was like, okay, this is I guess what I'm gonna do. I love people. And when I was 12 years old, he was 6'4", 330-pound black guy in our congregation, and I really love this guy. He turned me on to hip hop, and I was like little white kid, and I was like, this music, it's so good. But he was just a massive guy, and he had huge hands, and he put it on top of my head when I was 12, and he's like, boy, the Lord told me that you're gonna reach thousands of people over your lifetime. And like a 12-year-old, you're like, thousands of people from Dean? Oh, like that's heavy. That's heavy. So fast forward into my early adult life after I graduated college, and I still wasn't sure about that. I was like, I just don't feel that's my calling in life. And so I was at PBA at the time, and we had no coffee shops. We had Starbucks in Barnes & Noble and City Place. City Place opened, I think, 2001, and that's where I hung out. So there was no space. There was no like community space in West Palm. And so I was like, I think I'm going to do that. So I wrote my first business plan for a coffee shop when I was a senior at PBA. And I was playing music at the time. Had $0 to open a coffee shop. So you get all caught up in like the grand vision of what you could do, and then you're like, oh, that's a lot of money. Probably can't do that. So I was playing music. We ended up touring, and I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is thousands of people. So through music, okay, this is it. My wife was with me on the road with the band, and we, she loved it. But I made the commitment to her that I would never leave her home. And in music, that's very difficult. Usually the spouses stay home, especially when you're a starting band. Record labels don't really subsidize much of your life. So 3/4 of the way through a tour, the label said, we're going to stop subsidizing the lives on the road. So 2 weeks later, I was out. I made that commitment to her. And so my life made an abrupt turn. And I was like, oh, well, that's over. And I still have no money. And I'm 27 years old. This is awesome. No resume, like, hey, I'm a musician. You want to hire me? Like a lot of skills. And so went to Nashville and just hung out for 6 weeks and tried to figure out what I should do. Ended up teaching randomly. Fast forward 3 years later, my brother called me and he's like, hey man, I know you wanted to open a coffee shop. And he was in DC at the time. I was like, yeah. He said, well, I have a corner in the gallery, so if you want to come up, you want to do it? 6 weeks later, I had the wife, and we went up there, and I'm building my bar, and every ounce of income that we had, every nail was counted. Super stressful. My wife was a mess. She's like, why are we doing this? Like, I worked at Starbucks. People don't treat you well. Like, this is not going to be fun. And we're just outside of DC, and where the coffee shop was, it was in a development with upstairs was 8 floors of IBM working on a Homeland Security project. Across the street was 6 floors of corporate attorneys. The next building over was 4 venture capital firms. I mean, like high-level people. And I'm trying to convince her that they're going to be receptive to us and treat us like really solid human beings. And she didn't buy it. But I was like, the intention, so our intention is true, right? And then, let me pause the story for a second. So I think it's really important when you're identifying your intention, that you hold on to it no matter the circumstance or the reward. It is true. A lot of people use intention to manipulate. They use it to manipulate, to profit. So I'm coming at intention this morning in its purest sense. Transparent, truth. I should probably start my there, we'll skip right past that. So this is what intention is to me, like these foundational things. So know that. It's a very nuanced, like most things in life, intention, you can come at it from much different angles. But the most fulfilling and honest way is based on these 4 things, which equals a good human. And so I told Nat, I said, I believe that if we do this, that it's going to resonate. I was 30 years old at the time, and 3 months into it, I figured out, okay, this is real. So my intention of making people feel known, creating that space every day over 3 minutes, is powerful. And it was. I had, I can't figure this mic out. That's why I serve coffee. But so the head of security for Homeland Security took me out for 3 hours, told me way too much. Why? Because he couldn't talk to anyone. And so I was the guy he chose to talk to. The head of adventure, yeah, it's crazy. I'm pretty sure his clearance level would have been revoked after the things he told me. But it was awesome. And I love that. And then another CEO for a venture capital firm came in. Before I was opening, he knocked on the door, and he had to let go of 10 people that day, and he wanted my advice. And I was like, babe, this is what I'm talking about. Like, 225, 12 ounces at a time, banana bread. This speaks to people. This is powerful. This is how culture changes. So very quickly, she bought into it. She's like, okay, I get it. And there was great sacrifice. So I think intention, like most things in life, if it's real, there's going to be a dramatic cost to it. That first year, I made a whopping $20,000. Can pay a lot of bills with that. A lot of bills. But it was great. So 2 years went by. Anyway, came down here, and now we're subculture. I better speed this up. I think we're like 12 minutes in. But the same thing, we came to a crossroads, and Rodney Mayo, I don't know if you guys know who he is. I heard about him, and our lease was up. And at the time, we were just a small coffee shop on Uncle Mattis called Habitat Coffee. And he wanted to open a coffee shop, so I sent him an email. I was like, hey, dude, I love your concepts. How about we meet? Because I'm going to switch spaces. And I was told it was BS. I was like, this dude is going to crush me if he opens a coffee shop. He's going to crush me because he has money, he has a following, and I'm just a dude. So I believe my intention, but I'm going to be broke if he does this. So we met, and the guy didn't say a word the whole first meeting. And if you know Rodney, he had his sunglasses on, his hat on, and he's just sitting there. I'm talking at him for like an hour. And all these things about why I'd be good, and this is what. At the end, I was like, man, do you want a coffee war? Yeah, it was great. That was great. So I was like, I pretty much blew that. But 5 meetings later, I think what Rodney and I have found in each other is we're both doing different things, but together our intention is exponentially greater. His resources, the vision, what we want to do, has been massively impactful. And it's really cool to see how it's resonated with the community. But the one thing or the first thing that I want to, and I'll be quick, don't freak out, ladies. Recognize and align in all things. I think this is the really crucial part with intention, and even with coffee, is that it's not a piece of your story. It's not a piece of your vision. It's like a pillar. It's foundational, and it has to be consistent. Otherwise, you're going to be all over the map. You're going to be fragmented. And so I think that's one thing that it's very difficult to identify. And it took me till I was 30, I feel like, to really get there. But when I look back, I was like, oh, this is consistent in my life. All these decisions were consistent, and they aligned with who I am and what I see. And the second thing, I originally talked before about we're just kind of all over the place. It's like we're intentional for this month. And we're like, oh, cool, that was all right. and we're over here, and now it's this, and this is my vision, and then I'm like really into this community. No, I'm not, because it didn't pan out. So like but we call it intention. Intention's a long game. Intention is not like those experiences. Sure, it's a cheap intention, and I don't mean to like beat anybody up, but those are kind of like quick passions, but it's not intention. Like intention is that commitment over years. Could be over a lifetime or a season. And I think that's really important in our culture to recognize that is to slow yourself and don't be distracted and keep going back. Keep going back to that. The third, and this is kind of what I touched on with my story, is your intention, don't let it be swayed by your success or failure. Because I'll tell you one thing, those first 3 months, over 9 years ago, when I first opened the coffee shop, those first 3 months were just as good as the past 3 months of my life with 3 coffee shops. And all of a sudden you get a seat at the table when you're successful as a businessman. I'm like, I've been saying the same stuff for 9 years. But all of a sudden, because I have these businesses, my words are worth more. That's just life, but that's okay. But inside, I'm no happier. Why? Because my intention was about creating space for you and for you and for you and continuing your story one by one. It's not about, I need 1,000 people for it to resonate with. And so that's a really powerful thing in your life, and it creates that long-term focus when you don't let success or failure sway what your intention is. So to wrap it up, right? I can barely see it. It's really hard with these lights, so I'm keying in on it over there. But how many of you feel as if you have, and you don't have to raise your hand, but do you have an intention for your life? And you're like, man, that's a lot. And I get it, but it's crucial. It really is crucial. So my mom, I'm going to end with it. This was one of the things that really solidified and kind of changed my thought process. My mom died. Sorry, it's like those small things I could never remember. Squirrel, it's like. But my mom died. She had cancer. She died over 2 years ago, and I sent the doctor a thank you note after she passed, and I just said, "Hey, man, you're like what you did for her, just how you were. It was beyond what you needed to do. How you showed up for her." And I said, "I don't really understand how you do it. You deal with cancer patients all the time; they die a lot." Because he dealt with the ones that were terminal mostly. And he said, "It's not about saving lives, it's about giving people time, and I can do that for every single one." And I was like, whoa, I get it. I totally get that now. And in that moment, 2 years ago, really, really put in place what it means to me. So, thank you for listening this morning. I want to wrap it up, but it's been great, and I hope that you guys in your own lives feel that peace and that contentment in all things. I wish that for you. I pray that for you, and it's been an honor.